When that email from the New York Gallery landed in my inbox, I never expected it would unravel years of deception. I had just finished another exhausting double shift at the hospital, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when the notification appeared. Congratulations to Madison Wells on her stunning collection. Except I was Madison Wells, and I hadn't submitted any collection. I stared at my phone, fatigue instantly replaced by confusion as I opened the email. There it was, my childhood paintings, my college portfolio pieces, my recent experimental works, all displayed under my name but with a biography I didn't recognize. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. A biography that mirrored my twin sister Carol's life, not mine. For 5 years, I'd watched my twin sister build a reputation in the art world while I worked endless hospital shifts to pay off my student loans. I'd been proud of her success, encouraged her talent, celebrated her gallery openings. But now, looking at these images, my images, everything shifted. The sister I'd supported, defended, and loved had been stealing my work and claiming it as her own all along. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the online gallery showcase. These weren't similar styles or inspired pieces. These were my actual paintings, photographed from my portfolio, from my studio apartment walls, even from our childhood home. Pieces I'd created during late nights after hospital shifts, therapeutic, expressions of a medical career that drained and fulfilled me in equal measure. Art I created for myself, never intending to share it professionally. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter, trying to process what I was seeing. Carol and I had always been different sides of the same coin. She was outgoing where I was reserved, confident where I was cautious. While I had pursued medicine, she had chosen art, or so I thought. Now I wondered if she'd ever created anything. At all. The gallery was promoting a special exhibition opening on our upcoming 30th birthday, just 3 weeks away. They praised Madison Wells for her unique perspective that clearly draws from her medical background. A special section highlighted my collection titled Surgical Impressions, paintings I'd created after particularly challenging operations, working through my emotions with brush and canvas. While my mind raced, my phone lit up with a text from Carol. Hey sis, don't forget we're finalizing birthday plans tomorrow. Thinking something small this year? Love you. I stared at the message, my sister's casual words now carrying an entirely different weight. How many times had she messaged me like this, playing the role of loving sister while simultaneously building her career on my creativity? How long had this been happening? With shaking hands, I typed back a simple, "Sure, see you then," while my thoughts spiraled through years of memories, re-examining them through this new lens of betrayal. I remembered Carol visiting my apartment, admiring my paintings, taking photos. Because they're so good, Maddie. I remembered her encouraging me to paint more despite my busy schedule, insisting it was good for my mental health. I remembered her borrowing finished canvases for her apartment renovation and never returning them. 3 years ago, when Carol first mentioned she was gaining recognition in the art world, I'd been too consumed with my medical residency to attend her exhibitions. She'd bring me programs, press clippings, and share social media posts, always careful to show images of herself at openings but never clear shots of the art itself. The lighting never does them justice, she'd explain. I scrolled back through her Instagram, seeing posts I'd only given cursory glances before. Carol posing beside blurred or partially shown artwork. Carol receiving awards. Carol giving interviews. The captions all carefully crafted to imply creation without directly claiming it. So honored to have my vision recognized. Bringing this piece to life was a journey. Clever, calculated ambiguity. Our friends and family had always praised her success, often in my presence. Your sister is so talented, Madison. Carol really found her calling. I'd nodded along, genuinely happy for her, never once suspecting she was receiving accolades for my work. I opened my laptop and searched. For more information, article after article appeared, reviews praising Madison Wells for her technical precision and emotional depth, interviews where Madison discussed inspirations drawn from medical experiences only I had lived. In each piece, the artist was described but never pictured, with Carol handling all correspondence on behalf of her reclusive sister. My sister had constructed an elaborate lie, positioning herself as my representative while simultaneously being the artist. She had created a narrative where her outgoing twin managed the publicity for her talented but introverted sister, a convenient explanation for why Madison Wells never appeared in person. I clicked through to the gallery's website and found the event details for the birthday exhibition opening. It was being marketed as a special event. Join us in celebrating the Wells twins' 30th birthday with Madison's most personal collection. Yet and meet her representative, Carol Wells. The realization hit me with stunning clarity. Carol never expected me to discover this. She had compartmentalized her life so carefully, keeping her art world separate from our shared social circle. On the rare occasions our worlds collided, she'd introduced me as my sister, Maddie, the doctor. Never mentioning my name was also Madison, allowing people to assume Maddie was a nickname unrelated to the artist Madison Wells. I sat at my kitchen table until sunrise, piecing together this elaborate deception. For years, Carol had maintained this double life, being both herself and me, collecting recognition and presumably payment for artwork she hadn't created. While I worked 80-hour weeks at the hospital, she had built a career by stealing my identity and my passion. What hurt most wasn't just the theft of my artwork. It was the calculated nature of it all. Every encouraging word about my painting had been self-serving. Every time she'd told me she was proud of my medical career, she'd been ensuring I stayed in my lane, too busy saving lives to notice she was stealing my creative ones. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across my apartment, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her immediately. I wouldn't give her the chance to spin more lies or create a cover story. Our birthday was 3 weeks away, the very day she planned to showcase my most personal works to an audience that thought they knew Madison Wells. That gallery opening would be the perfect stage for the truth. For once, both Madison Wells would be in the same room, and everyone would learn which one was real. I closed my laptop and picked up my phone, typing a response to Carol's text about birthday plans. Actually, a big celebration sounds perfect. This year. Why don't we do something special? After all, turning 30 is a milestone worth remembering. Her reply came seconds later, bubbling with enthusiasm. OMG, yes! I was hoping you'd say that. Let's make it unforgettable. I set down my phone and smiled for the first time since receiving that email. Yes, Carol. Unforgettable is exactly what it will be. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of my life. Every interaction with Carol now felt like a performance. One, where I was constantly fighting the urge to scream the truth in her face. The sister I'd shared everything with since before birth had been living a double life at my expense. And somehow I had to pretend nothing had changed. We met for coffee the day after I discovered her deception. I arrived early at our usual spot, Frida's Cafe, and watched Carol through the window as she approached. She looked exactly as she always had, my mirror image with slightly shorter hair and more fashionable clothes. Yet suddenly she was a stranger. Maddie! She waved enthusiastically, sliding into the seat across from me. I've been thinking about our birthday nonstop. What if we rent out that rooftop bar on 7th Street? Gabe could DJ and we could invite everyone from… Actually, I interrupted, maintaining a carefully neutral expression. I was thinking about attending that gallery opening that night. The one at Morrison Gallery. Carol froze momentarily, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she recovered. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A gallery opening? On our birthday? That seems a bit boring, don't you think? I shrugged, watching her carefully. I've been wanting to get more into the art scene, supporting local artists and all that. But it's our 30th birthday, she protested, setting her cup down with slightly too much force. We should do something special just for us. The Morrison Gallery is featuring an artist I'm really interested in, I pressed, noting how her fingers tightened around her cup. Madison Wells. Have you heard of her? Carol's laugh came a beat too late. Oh, that. It's not really worth going to. Trust me, the artist is totally overrated. Funny, I said, stirring my coffee slowly. That's not what the critics say. Apparently, she has a unique perspective informed by her medical background. Sounds fascinating to me. Since when do you care about art openings? Carol's tone sharpened slightly. You're always too exhausted from hospital shifts to attend any cultural events. That's why you've missed all of mine. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. Maybe I'm realizing there's more to life than work. Maybe I want to see what else is out there. I leaned forward. Besides, don't you think it would be interesting to meet another Madison Wells? Carol's face paled slightly before she forced a smile. Trust me, it would be a waste of our birthday. Let's do something fun instead, something memorable. Oh, I plan to make it memorable, I replied, smiling back at her. In fact, I insist we go to that opening. It's decided. Something in my tone must have worried her because she quickly changed tactics. You know what? You're right. It's your birthday too. And if that's what you want to do, we'll do it. We can hit the rooftop bar afterward. Perfect, I said, raising my coffee cup in a mock toast. To new experiences. As our coffee date ended, I watched Carol leave, her posture slightly more rigid than when she had arrived. She was worried, and she should be. Over the following days, I began gathering evidence. I requested time off from the hospital for our birthday and the days surrounding it. I collected photographs of all my paintings, the ones still in my possession, and the ones I'd documented before they mysteriously disappeared to Carol's apartment. I contacted old professors who had seen my work during college, friends who had received my paintings as gifts, and even dug through old sketchbooks that Carol hadn't managed to appropriate. Each night after my hospital shifts, I'd come home and research art law and copyright infringement. I learned about the legal protections artists have over their work, about the concept of intellectual property, and about fraud. I consulted with a lawyer friend, Sebastian, presenting the situation as a hypothetical case involving a friend. Your friend needs to document everything, Sebastian advised, his expression suggesting he knew this wasn't actually about a friend. Original sketches, dated photographs of works in progress, witness statements from people who saw them creating the art. The more evidence of original creation, the stronger the case. And if this friend wanted to make a public statement? I asked. Sebastian winced. I'd advise against any dramatic confrontations. They should send a cease and desist letter first, then pursue legal channels if necessary. But I knew Carol. A letter would give her time to destroy evidence, to craft more lies, to prepare a counter-narrative that painted me as the jealous, unstable sister trying to steal her success. The public revelation I was planning was risky, but it was the only way to ensure the truth came out intact. 15 days before our birthday, Carol invited me to her apartment to finalize birthday details. I hadn't been to her place in months, my hospital schedule providing a convenient excuse to avoid seeing the space where I suspected many of my stolen paintings resided. Come in, come in. Carol ushered me inside, immediately guiding me toward the kitchen. I made those lemon squares you love. I deliberately slowed my pace, glancing around her living room. The walls were conspicuously bare. Redecorating? I asked innocently. Just changing things up, she said quickly. I'm going through a minimalist phase. Interesting timing, I noted, following her into the kitchen where no artwork hung. Fact, as I sipped the tea she offered and half listened to her birthday plans, I realized her entire apartment had been sanitized of any evidence of Madison Wells and her artwork. I stopped by the Morrison Gallery yesterday, I mentioned casually, watching her reaction over the rim of my teacup. Carol nearly dropped the plate of lemon squares. You did? Why? I wanted to see what the space was like before our birthday celebration there. The curator was very helpful. Apparently Madison Wells is their most promising new artist. Madison, I really think we should reconsider— No, I said firmly. I've made up my mind. That's where we're celebrating our birthday. As I left Carol's apartment that evening, I could practically feel her panic following me down the hallway. She was scrambling now, probably trying to figure out how to cancel the exhibition without raising suspicions, or perhaps planning how to continue the charade even with me in attendance. Little did she know, I'd already spoken with Mickey Johnson, the gallery's owner, under the guise of being an art journalist interested in covering the upcoming exhibition. Through careful questioning, I'd learned that Carol had been representing Madison Wells for 5 years, that all communications came through her, and that the reclusive artist had never appeared at her own openings. It's quite the story, Mickey had told me enthusiastically. Identical twins, one a brilliant but introverted artist, the other her outgoing business-minded representative. Carol handles everything public so Madison can focus entirely on creating. It's worked beautifully. For them. Yes, I thought as I headed home that night. It had worked beautifully for Carol, but not for much longer. 2 weeks before our birthday, I decided to dig deeper into exactly how extensive Carol's deception had been. If she had been selling my work for 5 years, there must be a paper trail, financial, records, contracts, communications with galleries and collectors. I started by searching online archives of local art magazines and newspapers. What I found stunned me. Carol hadn't just been taking credit for my current paintings. She had systematically built a career on my artwork going back to our college days. There was a feature from 6 years ago about an emerging talent named Madison Wells, displaying paintings I had created during my first year of medical residency, works I'd made to process the emotional toll of losing my first patient. The article quoted Madison describing how medical training provides a unique perspective on human fragility. Words I had actually said to Carol during a late-night phone call when I was struggling with my career choice. I found auction records showing pieces sold for increasingly impressive sums. $3,000, $8,500, $12,000, and most recently, $27,000 for a large canvas I had painted after a particularly difficult surgery. Money I never saw a penny of while I worked extra shifts to cover my student loans. The more I discovered, the more my shock transformed into cold anger. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was calculated, long-term fraud. Carol had been systematically building a career using my name, my talent, and my life experiences while I remained completely unaware. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception, so I contacted Debbie Williams, an art journalist whose name appeared on several articles, about Madison Wells. I created a new email account using my middle name and reached out as a researcher working on contemporary artists. Debbie responded enthusiastically, agreeing to a phone call. I'd be happy to discuss Madison Wells's work, she wrote. She's one of the most interesting emerging artists I've covered. During our call, I carefully guided the conversation, asking questions about the artist's background and creative process. I've interviewed Madison several times, Debbie explained, though always through email. Her sister Carol handles all in-person communications. It's an unusual arrangement, but it works for them. Have you ever actually met Madison? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Not in person. No. Carol explains that Madison has severe, social anxiety, and prefers to remain private. The medical career makes it difficult too, apparently. I gripped my phone tighter. Medical career? Yes, Madison is a trauma surgeon. It's what makes her work so compelling. That intersection between medical precision and artistic expression. Carol says Madison paints between hospital shifts as a form of stress relief. My entire body went cold. Carol hadn't just stolen my artwork. She had stolen my entire identity, my career story, my personal narrative. She had taken everything that made me who I was and repackaged it as backstory for her fictional artist persona. It's fascinating, really, Debbie continued, oblivious to my shock. Carol showed me photos once of Madison's home studio, medical textbooks alongside paint supplies. There's even a series based on surgical procedures that's generating huge interest from collectors. I knew exactly which series she meant. Paintings I'd created after particularly challenging surgeries, working through the complex emotions of holding someone's life in my hands. Deeply personal works I'd never intended to sell. The birthday exhibition is going to be quite special, Debbie added. First time they're showing the complete surgical impressions collection. I hear the pieces are already pre-sold for 6 figures. After thanking Debbie for her time, I sat in stunned silence. In my apartment, 6 figures. Carol had sold my most personal artistic expressions, the paintings that helped me process the trauma of my work, for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That evening, I received a text from Johnny, an old college friend who had recently returned to New York after years abroad. Just saw a flyer for Madison Wells' exhibition at Morrison Gallery. Isn't that you? Since when did you become a famous artist? My heart raced as I called him back immediately. Johnny had been in several art classes with me during college, before I fully committed to the pre-med track. He had seen me create dozens of pieces. Madison. What the hell? He exclaimed when he answered. I leave the country for a few years and you become a celebrated artist on the side? Way to bury the lead about your career, Dr. Wells. Johnny, I said carefully. What exactly did you see? A massive poster outside Morrison Gallery with your name on it. Then I Googled you and found all these articles. Why didn't you tell me? This is huge. Did you see any images of the artist? Photos of Madison Wells? No, just the artwork. But I'd recognize your style anywhere, those textured brushstrokes, the way you use color to create emotion rather than reality. It's definitely your work from college, just evolved. An unexpected lump formed in my throat. Johnny recognized my work instantly, while my own twin sister had been passing it off as hers for years. The betrayal cut even deeper. Johnny, I need a favor, I said, making a split-second decision. Are you free on the evening of the 17th? It's important. Your birthday? Sure, what's up? I need a witness. Someone who knew me and my artwork before all this started. Can you come to the gallery opening that night? Sounds mysterious, but I'm in, he replied. Should I be bringing popcorn for whatever drama you're planning? Just yourself, I said. And maybe any photos you might have of my artwork from college. After hanging up, I felt simultaneously terrified and resolved. Having Johnny there, someone who could authentically verify that the style and technique were mine from years ago, added another layer of credibility to my case. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the gallery openings I'd missed because of hospital shifts, all the times Carol had told me about her successful exhibitions while I was exhausted from saving lives. I thought about our parents' pride in their daughter, the artist, the creative twin, while I was the practical one who chose medicine. They had proudly attended Carol's shows, admiring work they had no idea was created by their other daughter. The next morning, I called in sick to the hospital. For the first time in 3 years. Instead of tending to patients, I drove to our parents' home in Connecticut. I needed to see if there was evidence there that might help my case. Mom was surprised to see me on a weekday. Madison, what a lovely surprise. Are you feeling all right? You look tired. Just needed a mental health day, I explained, hugging her. I thought I'd dig through some old boxes from high school and college, feeling nostalgic with the big birthday coming up. Of course, honey. Everything's still in the attic. Your father and I keep saying we should clear it out, but you know how it is. In the dusty attic, I found exactly what I was looking for. Sketchbooks from high school, portfolios from college art classes, photographs of me working on paintings that now appeared in Madison Wells' professional collection. Irrefutable evidence that these were my creations, dating back years before Carol began her fraudulent career. Most valuable of all, I found a local newspaper clipping from our senior year of high school, a feature on young artists that showed me beside one of my paintings, the distinctive style already developing, the same style that art critics now praised Madison Wells for perfecting. As I carefully packed these treasures into my car, a new text from Carol appeared. Great news! The rooftop bar is available for our birthday after all. Let's skip the boring gallery thing and have a real celebration. I've already started sending out invites. Call me. I smiled grimly as I drove back to the city. Carol was getting desperate, trying anything to prevent me from attending the exhibition. What she didn't realize was that her panic was only confirming my suspicions and strengthening my resolve. The countdown to our birthday had begun, and with each passing day, the web of lies Carol had woven grew more visible to me. And soon, it would be visible to everyone else too. With just 10 days until our birthday, I needed to craft a plan that would leave no room for Carol to spin more lies or escape accountability. This wasn't just about reclaiming my artwork. It was about reclaiming my identity and exposing the truth in a way that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. I met with Sebastian again, this time abandoning the pretense of discussing a hypothetical situation. His eyes widened as I spread the evidence across his dining room table: original sketches, dated photographs, newspaper clippings, and printouts of gallery listings showing my work with Carol's descriptions. Madison, this is... He trailed off, examining a college newspaper featuring me next to a painting that later sold at auction under Madison Wells. Identity theft? Fraud? A betrayal so complete I still can't fully process it? I offered. Sebastian nodded grimly. All of the above, and it's actionable, legally speaking. You have a solid case for copyright infringement, fraud, misappropriation of identity, and potentially significant financial damages. I don't just want legal action after the fact, I explained. I want to expose her at the exhibition, in front of everyone who has been deceived. I want the truth to come out in a way she can't control or manipulate. Sebastian frowned. That's risky. Public confrontations can backfire. She could claim you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're jealous of her success. That's why I need it to be airtight, I interrupted. Irrefutable evidence presented in a way that gives her no escape route. We spent hours developing a strategy. Sebastian advised me to create a digital presentation, a chronological documentation of my artistic development from childhood through medical school, time-stamped photos of works in progress, and testimonials from people who had witnessed me creating the art. You need to be methodical, he cautioned. No emotional accusations that could be dismissed. Just facts, evidence, and witnesses who can corroborate your story. I nodded, determination hardening within me. I'll prepare everything, but I need your help with one more thing. I need legal documentation ready to serve that night. Cease and desist orders, formal notice of copyright claims, everything. Sebastian agreed, though not without expressing concern about my well-being. This kind of betrayal by someone so close to you, it's traumatic, Madison. Are you sure you're ready to handle the fallout? I've been performing complex surgeries for years, I replied. I know how to remain calm during a crisis. But the truth was, medical emergencies were nothing compared to this personal betrayal. At the hospital, I dealt with strangers' traumas. This was my own, and it cut deeper than any surgical incision. Over the next week, I worked methodically on building my case, I contacted former professors who remembered my work, tracked down college friends who had watched me paint, and even found a former neighbor who had photographed me working on a series of landscapes that now sold under Madison Wells' signature. Most compelling was my conversation with Barbara, my undergraduate art professor who had urged me to pursue painting instead of medicine. She was shocked to learn about the situation. "I've seen Madison Wells's work in galleries," she admitted over the phone. "I even commented to colleagues how much it reminded me of a promising student I once had. I never imagined it actually was. Your work, Madison. Would you be willing to provide a statement confirming that you recognize the style and technique as mine from my college years?" I asked. "Absolutely," Barbara replied without hesitation. "I still have your portfolio assessments in my records. The technical elements I noted then, your distinctive brushwork, your approach to light and shadow, they're clearly evident in these supposedly new works. With each piece of evidence collected, with each person who confirmed my story, I felt simultaneously vindicated and devastated. So many people recognized my work, my style, my artistic voice. Yet for years, my own sister had claimed it as hers, building fame and fortune on my creativity. 7 days before our birthday, Carol showed up unannounced at my apartment, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "We need to talk about this birthday situation," she said, pushing past me into my living room. "I've already told everyone about the rooftop party. You're making this really difficult." I remained calm, watching her nervous movements. "I thought we agreed on the gallery opening. It's going to be boring and pretentious," she insisted, pacing my small living room. "Art people are exhausting. You wouldn't enjoy it." Funny coming from you, since you're apparently an art person yourself. Her eyes darted to mine, suspicious of my tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said lightly. "I'm just surprised you're so against attending an exhibition featuring Madison Wells. I would think you'd want to support her work." Carol's face flushed. "The thing is," she said, switching tactics, "there's been a change. The exhibition might be postponed. Gallery issues, that's why the rooftop makes more sense." "Really?" "Because I spoke with Mickey Johnson yesterday, and he said everything was on schedule. In fact, he seemed very excited about meeting the artist finally." Carol froze mid-step. "You spoke with Mickey?" "Just briefly," I said, watching her carefully. "I wanted to confirm the details for our birthday. He mentioned several art critics and collectors are attending specifically to meet Madison Wells in person for the first time." The color drained from her face. "Madison, look." "It's settled," I interrupted. "We're celebrating at the Morrison Gallery. I've already invited several of my hospital colleagues. They're excited to see what Madison Wells's work is all about." Carol stared at me, clearly trying to determine how much I knew. Finally, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. We'll do the gallery first, then the rooftop. But I really think you're going to be bored." After she left, I could almost feel the panic radiating from her retreating footsteps. She was cornered, and we both knew it. What she didn't know was just how thoroughly I had prepared for our birthday revelation. The next day, I received a call from Mickey Johnson himself. "Ms. Wells, this is Mickey from Morrison Gallery. Your sister asked me to reach out to you directly about the birthday arrangements." I tensed. "What did she say?" "Well, it's a bit awkward," he admitted. "She suggested we might need to reschedule the exhibition opening due to a family emergency. But since you'd already spoken with me about attending, I wanted to confirm this with you directly." Carol was getting desperate, trying to cancel the very exhibition she had spent months promoting. I almost admired her persistence, if not her ethics. "There's no family emergency, Mickey," I assured him. "The exhibition should proceed as planned. In fact, I'm very much looking forward to it." "Excellent," he replied, sounding relieved. "We've had tremendous interest in this show. The Surgical Impressions series has already generated significant pre-sales. It would be a shame to postpone." My stomach twisted at the mention of those particular paintings. my most personal works, created during some of the darkest moments of my medical career, now being sold without my knowledge or consent. Mickey, I said carefully, I'm curious. Has anyone ever questioned why Madison Wells never appears at her own openings? He chuckled. It's part of her mystique now. The reclusive surgeon artist, too busy saving lives to attend art world events. Carol has managed that narrative brilliantly. Everyone respects Madison's privacy while being intensely curious about her. And on our birthday? Is the artist expected to make an appearance? Carol has hinted this might be the first time. It's generated quite a buzz. Is that accurate? Yes, I said firmly. Madison Wells will definitely be there. 3 days before our birthday, I finalized my presentation and evidence portfolio. I arranged for Johnny and 2 other college friends to attend, each carrying specific pieces of evidence. Sebastian would be there with legal documents ready. Barbara would attend with my undergraduate portfolio reviews. Everything was in place for the confrontation I never imagined having, with the person I once trusted most in the world. As I reviewed my evidence one final time, my phone lit up with a text from Carol. Maddie, we really need to talk before the birthday thing. It's important. Can you come over tomorrow? Just you and me. She was making one last attempt to prevent the inevitable. Perhaps she wanted to confess, to beg forgiveness, or more likely to create a new deception that would keep me from attending the gallery opening. I texted back. Can't tomorrow, hospital shift. I'll see you at the gallery on our birthday. Looking forward to it. Her response came quickly. Please, Maddie, there's something you need to know. Too late, I thought. There were many things I needed to know, things I should have been told years ago, things I had discovered on my own instead. The irony wasn't lost on me that after years of Carol taking credit for my artwork, I would finally reveal myself as the true Madison Wells on the day we both entered the world. Our birthday had always connected us as twins. This year, it would mark the day we faced the truth that had divided us. I was ready. In 3 days, the world would know what Carol had done and who I really was. With just 48 hours until our birthday exhibition, I found myself standing in my apartment surrounded by the evidence of Carol's betrayal. Photographs, sketches, dated portfolios, and witness statements were meticulously organized in chronological order, a timeline of theft spanning years. I had just finished my final hospital shift before taking personal time off for our birthday, and its aftermath. Throughout my 12-hour day, I'd moved through the surgical ward with the same outward calm I always maintained, while inwardly rehearsing every detail of my plan. Dr. Wells, you seem distracted today. Nick, one of the surgical residents under my supervision, had commented during a brief break. Big plans for the birthday? You could say that, I'd replied, offering a smile that didn't reveal the storm beneath. It'll certainly be memorable. Now, alone in my apartment, I carefully packed the most crucial evidence into a portfolio case. The original sketches for paintings that later sold for thousands, childhood drawings that showed my distinctive style developing, photographs of me working on pieces that now hung in collectors' homes attributed to the fictional Madison Wells that Carol had created. My phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. Documents ready. Final review tomorrow at my office, 2 p.m. I confirmed the appointment, then checked the time. Almost midnight. As I moved to turn off the lights, a knock at my door startled me. It was far too late for casual visitors. Through the peephole, I saw Carol, her face drawn with anxiety, shoulders hunched as she'd never allow them to be in public. She knocked again, more insistently. Maddie, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Was I ready for this confrontation, without my carefully planned audience and evidence presentation? But perhaps it was better to hear whatever desperate story she'd concocted now, rather than be surprised by it at the gallery. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. It's midnight, Carol. I know. I'm sorry, she said, attempting to peer past me into the apartment. Can I come in? Please? I reluctantly stepped aside, mentally cataloging the evidence I'd left visible on my dining table. Too late to hide it now. Carol entered, immediately noticing the organized display of artwork and documents. She froze, her eyes darting from the portfolio case to the timeline I'd created. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I think you know exactly what it is," I replied calmly, closing the door behind her. Her eyes continued scanning the evidence, recognition, and panic fighting for dominance in her expression. "Maddie, whatever you think is happening, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. "Can you explain selling my paintings for thousands of dollars without my knowledge? Can you explain stealing my identity, not just my name, but my medical experiences, my personal stories?" Carol's face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen, Carol? Was I never supposed to find out? Was I supposed to keep working hospital shifts while you built a career on my creativity?" She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "It started so innocently," she whispered. "That first painting, the one you did, after losing your patient. I just wanted to show it to a gallery owner I'd met. I was so proud of you, of your talent. So proud that you claimed it as your own." I remained standing, unwilling to soften in the face of what appeared to be genuine distress. "No, not at first," she insisted. "I told him it was my twin sister's work, but he assumed your name was a pseudonym I was using, since we're both Madison Wells. He loved the medical angle, thought it was fascinating. Before I could correct him, he offered to show it." "And that justifies 5 years of systematic fraud?" Carol looked up, tears streaking her makeup. "When it sold, I was going to tell you, split the money. But then there was interest in more work, and I panicked. I borrowed more of your paintings, just temporarily, I told myself." "Borrowed?" I echoed incredulously. "You sold them, under my name but with your face attached to my biography." "It spiraled," she admitted, her voice breaking. Each lie required another lie to maintain it. The gallery wanted more work. Collectors were interested in the surgeon-artist narrative. Critics praised the unique perspective. I couldn't suddenly admit it wasn't actually me. So instead, you created an elaborate fiction where you were representing your reclusive twin while simultaneously taking credit for everything I created. She nodded miserably. "I convinced myself I was doing you a favor, marketing your talent while you focused on medicine. That someday, when the time was right, I'd tell everyone the truth, while keeping all the money and recognition for yourself." I asked coldly. "I've been putting aside your share," she said quickly, "in a separate account. Every sale, every commission, half is yours. I can show you." I laughed without humor. "How generous of you to keep only half of what you stole from me." Carol stood suddenly, moving toward the timeline display. "Madison, please. We can fix this. We don't have to do this publicly at the gallery. Think about what it would do to our family, to our reputation." "You mean your reputation?" Corrected. "My reputation as a surgeon is intact because I actually did the work. You're the one who's been living a lie. If you expose this at the exhibition, it will destroy everything," she pleaded. "The collectors who purchased the artwork, the galleries, credibility, our parents' trust. You destroyed those things the moment you decided to steal my work," I said firmly. "I'm not responsible for protecting a fraud you created." Carol's desperation visibly shifted to calculation, a familiar expression I'd seen countless times when she was formulating a new plan. "What if we work together moving forward? You create the art, I handle the business side. Officially this time. We could be partners. A real collaboration." After 5 years of lies, after you took my most personal expressions and sold them, Without my consent? I shook my head. There's no partnership to be had here, Carol. Just accountability. She stared at me for a long moment, then her shoulders slumped in defeat. What are you going to do? Exactly what I planned. At the exhibition, I'm going to reveal that I am the real Madison Wells. I'm going to show evidence proving I created every piece in that gallery. And then, I'm going to let everyone draw their own conclusions about the person who has been impersonating me for years. Carol's face paled. You would humiliate me like that? Your own twin? You didn't consider it humiliation when you were taking credit for my work, I pointed out. Why is it only humiliating when the truth comes out? Because everyone will be watching, she cried. Everyone we know will see. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before building a career on stolen work, I replied, moving toward the door. It's late, Carol. I think you should go. She stood unmoving, tears flowing freely now. Maddie, please, we're sisters. Twins. We came into this world together. Don't do this to me. For a brief moment, my resolve wavered. Despite everything, this was my twin. The person I'd shared a womb with, grown up alongside, loved unconditionally for 30 years. But then I remembered the systematic deception, the calculated theft not just of my artwork, but of my identity itself. You did this to yourself? I said quietly, opening the door. And now it's time to face the consequences. Carol moved slowly toward the exit, stopping just before crossing the threshold. If you do this, there's no going back, she warned, her voice barely audible. This changes everything between us. Forever. I met her gaze steadily. You already changed everything when you decided to steal my life's work. I'm just bringing the truth to light. After she left, I stood in the silent apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, wondering if I had just witnessed the last conversation I would ever have with my twin, where any pretense of normalcy remained. In less than 48 hours, our relationship would be irreparably transformed. Alongside our public identities, our family dynamics, and possibly our entire futures. Yet despite the heaviness in my chest, I felt an unfamiliar sense of liberation. After years of having my creative voice appropriated and commercialized without my knowledge, I was finally reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Whatever came next would at least be authentic. Painful, perhaps, but real. I carefully covered the evidence display and went to bed, knowing that the next time I saw Carol would be at the Morrison Gallery, where the truth would finally be revealed to everyone. The day before our birthday dawned with an unusual stillness. I'd taken the day off from the hospital, ostensibly to prepare for the celebration, but in reality to finalize every detail of my plan. At 2 o'clock, I met Sebastian at his office to review the legal documents. These are ready to be served, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. Cease and desist orders, formal copyright claims, and a demand for accounting of all sales and profits from your work. I nodded, scanning the documents. And these will be legally binding the moment they're delivered? Yes. Once served, Carol will be legally prohibited from selling, displaying, or profiting from any of your artwork without explicit permission. The financial accounting demand requires her to disclose all transactions related to your work. I closed the folder, a strange mix of vindication and sadness washing over me. I never imagined I'd need legal protection from my own twin. Sebastian's expression softened. Family betrayals are often the most painful. Are you sure you're prepared for tomorrow? Emotionally, I mean. I don't think anyone can be fully prepared for something like this, I admitted, but I'm ready to reclaim what's mine. As I left Sebastian's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Mickey Johnson. Excitement building for tomorrow's exhibition. Several major collectors confirmed attendance. Carol mentioned you might stop by early to see the setup. Welcome anytime. My stomach tightened. Carol was clearly planning something, perhaps hoping to intercept me before the official opening. to make one last plea or threat away from witnesses. I decided to adjust my plan accordingly. Next, I met Johnny at a cafe near the gallery to review our strategy for the following evening. "I've rounded up those photos from college," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. "You painting in the studio, your work displayed at student exhibitions. Even found one of both you and Carol at that junior showcase. You with your paintings, her with her— what did she even do back then?" "Installation art," I recalled. "Conceptual pieces. They were actually quite good, but she never had the patience to develop her technique. She wanted immediate recognition." Johnny shook his head. "And instead of putting in the work, she stole yours. That's messed up, Maddie." "It is," I agreed quietly. "But tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. So what's the game plan? Do I just show up with these photos? Or is there a signal or something?" I explained the sequence of events I had planned, arriving after the exhibition had begun, allowing Carol to maintain her charade just long enough for key people to be present, then making my entrance with evidence ready. "I need you near the main display of the Surgical Impressions series," I told him. "When I approach that area, be ready." After finalizing details with Johnny, I returned home to prepare for what would likely be one of the most significant days of my life. I laid out my outfit, a deep blue dress that contrasted with Carol's usual preference for bold reds and vibrant patterns. We might be identical twins, but tomorrow I wanted no confusion about which Madison Wells was which. As evening approached, I received multiple texts from Carol, each more urgent than the last. "We need to talk before tomorrow. Please answer. Your phone." "This is serious, Maddie. Don't do something we'll both regret." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to discuss. Either Carol would face the consequences of her actions with dignity, or she would continue trying to manipulate the situation until the very end. Either way, my course was set. Just as I was preparing for an early night, my phone rang. Not Carol, but our mother. "Madison, I'm so excited about your birthday celebration tomorrow," she said cheerfully. "Dad and I are planning to be at the gallery by 7. Carol mentioned it's quite a special event." My throat tightened. In all my planning, I'd somehow avoided fully confronting the fact that our parents would witness everything. Their daughter's relationship imploding in public. The revelation that one had been systematically defrauding the other for years. "Mom," I said carefully, "just so you know, tomorrow might be complicated." "Complicated? What do you mean, dear?" I hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "Carol and I have some things to work through. It might get emotional." Mom laughed lightly. "You two have been working through things since before you were born. Remember when you were delivered? How you had those little bruises on your arm because Carol had been kicking you in the womb? Always fighting for space, even then." The irony wasn't lost on me. Even before birth, Carol had been asserting herself at my expense. "This is different, Mom," I said softly. "Just be prepared, okay?" "Madison, you're worrying me. Is everything all right?" "It will be," I promised. "After tomorrow, everything will be clear." After hanging up, I felt a wave of doubt crash over me. Was I doing the right thing? Would a private confrontation be less damaging to our family? But then I remembered the years of deception, the systematic theft not just of my artwork but of my identity, my experiences, my voice. No, this needed to be public, not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserved the same audience that had witnessed the lies. That night, I dreamed of our childhood. Carol and I drawing side by side at the kitchen table, our matching blonde heads bent over separate papers, creating different worlds. Even then, our artistic approaches had diverged, my careful attention to detail versus her bold, conceptual strokes. We had been so different yet so connected, complementary rather than competitive. When had that changed? When had Carol decided that my creativity was something to appropriate rather than admire? And how had I been so blind to it for so long? I woke early on our birthday, the milestone we had once anticipated sharing with celebration now looming as a day of confrontation. 30 years ago, we had entered the world together, minutes apart, connected in the most fundamental way possible. Today, we would stand on opposite sides of a truth that would forever change our relationship. As morning light filtered through my curtains, I received a final text from Carol. "Happy birthday, twin. Whatever happens tonight, remember we share the same blood, the same birthday, the same beginning. Some bonds can't be broken, even when stretched beyond recognition. I'll see you at the gallery." There was something ominous in her wording, something that suggested she had a contingency plan. Carol had always been the strategist between us, thinking several moves ahead. I would need to be prepared for whatever she might attempt. I spent the morning reviewing my evidence once more, then carefully packed everything I would need for the evening. The original sketches for paintings now selling for thousands, childhood drawings showing my artistic development, photos of me creating works that would later appear in Madison Wells exhibitions, testimonials from instructors and friends who had witnessed my creative process over the years. At noon, Sebastian texted confirming he would be at the gallery with the legal documents ready. Barbara, my former art professor, confirmed she had arrived in New York and would bring my undergraduate portfolio evaluations. Johnny and 2 other college friends were prepared with their evidence. Everything was in place. In just a few hours, the truth would finally be revealed. The real Madison Wells would step forward, reclaiming her work and her identity. As I prepared to leave my apartment, I caught my reflection in the mirror, the face Carol and I shared, yet with subtle differences only those closest to us could discern. My expression more serious, my eyes carrying the weight of lives I'd fought to save in the operating room, while hers remained unencumbered by such responsibility. "Happy birthday, Madison," I whispered to myself. "Today, you take back your life." The Morrison Gallery was already bustling when I arrived, 15 minutes after the official opening time. Through the large glass windows, I could see elegant figures circulating with champagne flutes, admiring artwork that had emerged from my hands, my heart, my experiences, yet bore Carol's fraudulent stamp of representation. I paused outside, taking a deep breath to steady myself. This moment had been building for weeks, yet nothing could fully prepare me for what was about to happen. I spotted Sebastian through the window, standing alertly near the entrance with his leather portfolio containing the legal documents. Johnny and our college friends were positioned strategically throughout the space, as planned. Barbara, my former professor, was engaged in conversation with an art critic near the central display. Everything was in place. It was time. As I pushed open the door, the gallery's ambient sounds washed over me. Gentle music, the hum of conversation, the delicate clink of glasses. I scanned the room, immediately spotting Carol across the gallery. She was radiant in a striking red dress, gesturing animatedly as she spoke with Mickey Johnson and 2 well-dressed patrons. She hadn't noticed me yet. Sebastian approached immediately, his expression professional but concerned. "Ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, gripping my evidence portfolio more tightly. "Let's wait until my parents arrive. I want them to hear the truth directly from me, not secondhand." We moved deeper into the gallery, and I felt my breath catch as I encountered my artwork displayed professionally for the first time. Pieces I had created in stolen moments between hospital shifts, emotional outlets never intended for public consumption, now hanging on pristine walls with perfect lighting and printed placards attributing them to Madison Wells, represented by Carol Wells. The Surgical Impressions series dominated the central wall, abstract representations of surgical procedures I had performed, each capturing the tension, fear, and ultimately hope that accompanied saving a life. These were my most personal works, born from experiences only I had lived through, Yet here they were, being celebrated as someone else's creative vision. Madison! My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I turned to see my parents approaching, both dressed formally for the occasion. My father looked uncharacteristically uncomfortable in his suit, clearly out of place in the art world setting, but making the effort for what he believed was Carol's special night. You look beautiful, Mom said, embracing me. We're so proud of you girls, though I must say it's a bit confusing having two Madison Wells here tonight. She laughed, completely unaware of the irony in her words. Dad hugged me next. Happy birthday, kiddo. Quite a turnout for Carol's exhibition, isn't it? She's really made a name for herself. My throat tightened at his innocent comment. Actually, Dad, there's something important you both need to know. Before I could continue, I felt a presence at my shoulder. Carol had spotted me and moved across the room with remarkable speed. Maddie, you made it, she exclaimed, her voice projecting enthusiasm while her eyes telegraphed warning. She embraced me tightly, whispering urgently in my ear, Please don't do this. Not here. Not now. I disengaged from her embrace, maintaining my composure. Carol, happy birthday. Isn't this exciting? She continued, linking her arm through mine as if we were the united front we'd always presented to the world. Everyone's here to see the collection, even critics from the Times and Art Forum. Madison was just about to tell us something important, Mom said, looking between us with growing confusion at the palpable tension. Carol laughed a bit too brightly. Oh, it can wait. This is a celebration. Let me show you the newest pieces that just arrived this morning. She attempted to steer our parents away, but I stood firm. Actually, it can't wait. Mom, Dad, I need to show you something. Carol's grip on my arm tightened. Maddie, please, she hissed. Think about what you're doing. I carefully removed her hand from my arm. I have thought about it. For weeks. It's time for the truth. My father frowned, looking between us. Girls, what's going on? I'd like to know that too, came Mickey Johnson's voice as he approached our increasingly tense gathering. Carol, is everything all right? People are asking to meet the artist. Mickey, I said, extending my hand. I'm Madison Wells. He looked confused, glancing between Carol and me. Yes, I know. Carol's twin sister, the doctor. We spoke on the phone. No, I said firmly. I'm Madison Wells, the artist. Every piece in this gallery was created by me, not by Carol. A stunned silence fell over our small circle. Mickey's mouth opened slightly in confusion. My mother gasped, and my father's brow furrowed deeply. Carol recovered first, forcing a laugh. My sister has such a weird sense of humor. Madison's been so supportive of my work over the years. Sometimes she feels like she created it herself. It's not humor, I said, opening my portfolio and removing the first piece of evidence, a newspaper. Clipping from our college years showing me with paintings that were now selling in galleries under Madison Wells. These are my creations, my artwork, my experiences. Carol has been fraudulently claiming my work as her own for 5 years. Mickey Johnson looked at the newspaper, then at Carol, his professional demeanor cracking. What is this? It's a misunderstanding, Carol insisted, her voice rising slightly. Maddie's confused. She's been under a lot of pressure at the hospital. I'm not confused, I interrupted, producing more evidence. Dated photographs, original sketches, early drafts of paintings, now hanging on the gallery walls. I've been painting since childhood. These surgical impressions pieces, they're based on my experiences as a surgeon, procedures I performed, patients I treated. My mother took the photographs with trembling hands, recognition dawning in her eyes as she saw image after image of me creating artwork that now hung on the gallery walls. Carol, she whispered, what did you do? Carol's composure finally cracked. Mom, it's not what it looks like. We had an arrangement. She created, I promoted. We just never formalized it. There was no arrangement, I said calmly. You took my work without permission and built a career claiming it as your own. By now, our conversation had drawn attention. A small crowd was forming around us, including several art critics, collectors, and gallery patrons. Johnny approached with Barbara, both carrying additional evidence. I was Madison's undergraduate professor, Barbara announced, displaying my college portfolio reviews. I've known her work for years. This style, these techniques, they're unquestionably hers. I recognized them immediately when I saw Madison, Wells exhibitions, though I never imagined it was actually my former student's work being displayed under such unusual circumstances. Mickey Johnson looked increasingly distressed. Carol, is this true? Have you been misrepresenting yourself as the artist? Carol's eyes darted around the room, taking in the growing audience, the mounting evidence, the expressions of shock and disappointment. For a moment, I glimpsed genuine panic in her expression, the realization that her carefully constructed facade was crumbling before her eyes. Then, remarkably, she straightened her shoulders and attempted one last defense. It was a collaborative process, she insisted, addressing the crowd rather than me. Madison created the initial pieces, yes, but I developed them, refined them, made them marketable. I built the Madison Wells brand from nothing. Without me, these would just be hobby paintings gathering dust in a doctor's apartment. Sebastian stepped forward then, legal documents in hand. That's not how copyright law works, Ms. Wells. Creation establishes ownership. Refinement without permission is still infringement. My father, who had been silent through this exchange, finally spoke. Carol, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Just tell us the truth. Did you take your sister's artwork and claim it as your own? The gallery had fallen completely silent now, every eye on Carol as she stood caught between exposure and denial. For a brief moment, I saw something flicker across her face, perhaps regret, perhaps simply the recognition that her options had narrowed to one. It started with just one painting, she finally admitted, her voice barely audible in the hushed gallery. Just one. And then it became everything. The collective intake of breath from the onlookers was audible. Mickey Johnson looked physically ill. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. And I, standing before my stolen artwork with the truth finally exposed, felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what had been lost between us, for the trust that had been shattered beyond repair, and for the sister who had sacrificed our bond for the illusion of artistic achievement. The confrontation had only just begun, but already the damage was irreversible. In the stunned silence of the Morrison Gallery, surrounded by the fruits of my creativity and Carol's deception, we stood as twins united by birth but divided by betrayal, our 30th birthday marking not a celebration, but an ending. The silence that had fallen over the gallery seemed to stretch endlessly, a collective holding of breath as Carol's admission hung in the air. Then, like a dam breaking, the room erupted into murmurs, gasps, and urgent whispers. Mickey Johnson was the first to recover his professional composure, though his face remained ashen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice strained, but authoritative. "I must ask for your patience as we address this unexpected situation. Please continue to enjoy the refreshments while we sort this matter out." He then turned to us, gesturing toward his private office at the back of the gallery. "I think we should continue this discussion somewhere less public." My parents, Sebastian, Carol, and I followed him through the crowd, which parted like water, around us. I could feel the weight of dozens of stares on my back. Collectors who had spent thousands on Madison Wells originals, critics who had praised work they'd attributed to the wrong creator, gallery patrons witnessing an unprecedented scandal unfold in real time. As we entered Mickey's office, Carol suddenly found her voice again. "This isn't how it looks," she insisted, pacing the small room. I was building something for both of us. A brand, a legacy. I was going to bring Maddie in eventually, make her a partner. Without ever asking me, I countered quietly. Without sharing the money or the recognition, I kept records of everything, she said desperately. Every sale, every commission. Your share is in a separate account. I wasn't stealing from you. You stole my work, I said. My creativity, my voice. You can't separate those things from the money. Mickey sank heavily into his chair, looking shell-shocked. I've built this gallery's reputation on integrity and authenticity, he said, almost to himself. This is unprecedented. It's fraud, Sebastian stated bluntly, placing the legal documents on Mickey's desk. Copyright infringement, identity theft, and misrepresentation for financial gain. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. I don't understand, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Carol, we raised you better than this. Both of you. Your sisters. Twins. How could you do this to each other? I didn't do anything to Carol, I pointed out. I've been creating art for my own healing, my own processing of difficult experiences as a surgeon. Carol took that private expression and commercialized it without my knowledge. It wasn't like that, Carol protested. I saw how talented she was, how her work deserved to be seen. Maddie was always too modest, too focused on medicine to pursue art professionally. I was helping her. By erasing me from my own creation? I asked. By taking credit for experiences you never lived? My mother, who had been standing silently by the door, finally approached Carol. All those gallery openings we attended, she said softly. All those times we celebrated your success. We were so proud of you. You can still be proud, Carol insisted, desperation edging her voice. I built this. I created the market for Madison Wells artwork. I made connections, convinced galleries to show the pieces, developed relationships with collectors. None of this would exist without me. And none of it would exist without my artwork, I countered. Art you took without permission and profited from for years. Mickey finally seemed to gather himself. The legal and ethical issues here are substantial, he said, scanning the documents Sebastian had provided. The gallery may face liability for selling work under misrepresented circumstances. I've included a proposed resolution that would minimize damage to the gallery, Sebastian offered. Full disclosure to all affected parties, proper attribution of the artwork to Dr. Madison Wells as the creator, and a complete accounting of all sales and proceeds. And Carol? Mickey asked, looking at her with a mixture of anger and disbelief. What happens to her role in all this? That depends on several factors, Sebastian replied professionally, including her willingness to make full restitution and cease all fraudulent representations. Throughout this exchange, I watched Carol carefully. The initial shock had faded from her expression, replaced by something more calculating. She had always been quick to adapt, to find new angles when confronted with obstacles. I could almost see her mind working, restructuring her narrative in real time. The exhibition, she said suddenly, turning to me. The people out there came to see Madison Wells's artwork. They don't care which twin created it. They care about the art itself. We could still salvage this. Salvage what exactly? I asked. The brand, the reputation. We announce a new partnership. The truth that you're the creator, that I've been, the business mind and public face. We frame it as a revelation, not a scandal. The surgeon artist steps forward at last. The audacity of her proposal left me momentarily speechless. Even now, caught in her deception, Carol was looking for ways to maintain her position, to turn exposure into opportunity. You want to convert your fraud into a legitimate business arrangement? Sebastian asked incredulously. I want to protect what I've built, Carol insisted. What we could still have together. Think about it, Maddie. You could keep your medical career and still have recognition for your art. I'd handle the business side, the parts you never wanted to deal with anyway. For a brief moment, I considered her proposal. There was a certain pragmatic logic to it, a way to move forward that might minimize damage to everyone involved. The collectors would still have authentic Madison Wells artwork, just with a revised understanding of the creative process. The gallery could frame it as a revelation rather than a scandal. But then I remembered the years of lies, the systematic theft, not just of my artwork, but of my experiences, my voice, my identity. I thought about Carol laughing with collectors and critics about inspirations drawn from surgical procedures she'd never performed, traumas she'd never witnessed, lives she'd never fought to save. No, I said finally, my voice firm. No more deception, no more manipulation. Carol's expression hardened. Then you'll destroy everything. The value of your own artwork will plummet when this becomes a public scandal. The collectors will sue. The gallery might not survive. Is that what you want? To burn it all down out of principle? My father stepped between us, his expression grave. That's enough, Carol. You created this situation. Don't blame your sister for refusing to perpetuate. A lie. Mickey cleared his throat. Regardless of how we proceed, I need to address the people in my gallery. They deserve some explanation. He looked at me questioningly. Dr. Wells, Madison, what would you like me to tell them? I considered the crowd waiting beyond the office. Door. The collectors who had unwittingly purchased my stolen artwork. The critics who had praised it without knowing its true creator. The friends and colleagues who had gathered to celebrate what they thought was Carol's artistic achievement. Tell them the truth, I said simply. That I am Madison Wells, the creator of every piece in this exhibition. That there has been a serious misrepresentation that we're now correcting, and that I'll be happy to discuss my actual artistic process and inspiration with anyone who's interested. Mickey nodded, rising from his chair. And Carol's role? I looked at my twin, my mirror image with whom I had shared everything from the womb to this moment of ultimate division. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to demand her public humiliation. Just say that there has been a misunderstanding. About attribution that's now being clarified, I said quietly. The legal and financial aspects can be handled privately. As Mickey moved toward the door, Carol caught my arm. Maddie, please, she whispered. Don't do this. Not like this. I gently removed her hand. You had 5 years to choose a different path, Carol. You had countless opportunities to tell the truth. This moment is the result of your choices, not mine. As Mickey opened the door to address the waiting crowd, the noise from the gallery washed over us. Curious voices, concerned murmurs, the sound of a reputation unraveling, and a truth finally emerging into the light. Mickey Johnson stood at the center of his gallery, the crowd gathering tightly around him. I watched from the doorway of his office as he cleared his throat, his professional demeanor straining under the weight of what he needed to announce. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience, he began. I need to make an important announcement regarding the Madison Wells collection. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Mickey. I stepped forward to stand beside him, conscious of every gaze shifting to me, the identical twin they all knew as Carol's sister, the doctor. I'd like to introduce you to the true creator of every piece in this exhibition, Mickey continued, gesturing toward me. Dr. Madison Wells is not only a gifted surgeon, but the actual artist behind all the work you see tonight. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. I could see collectors exchanging bewildered glances, critics whispering urgently to one another, friends looking between Carol and me with dawning comprehension. There has been a significant misattribution of these artworks, Mickey explained, choosing his words carefully. Dr. Wells created these pieces over many years, drawing from her experiences in medicine and her personal artistic vision. We are correcting this misunderstanding effective immediately. From the back of the crowd, a voice called out, Are you saying Carol Wells isn't the artist? That she's been taking credit for her sister's work? Before Mickey could respond, I stepped forward. This was my moment to reclaim my voice after years of silence. Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. Every painting, every sketch, every piece in the Madison Wells collection was created by me. The Surgical Impressions series was inspired by actual procedures I performed as a trauma surgeon. They were personal expressions of experiences. Only I lived through. The gallery erupted in shocked exclamations. I continued, determined to tell my truth completely. I only discovered this misattribution recently, when the gallery sent an email congratulating me on my upcoming exhibition, an exhibition I knew nothing about. For years, I created art as a private outlet for the emotional weight of my medical work, never intending it for public display or sale. I could see Carol standing in the office doorway, her face a mask of controlled emotion. Our parents flanked. Her, my mother's hand on her arm. Whether in comfort or restraint, I couldn't tell. A prominent art critic stepped forward. I interviewed Madison Wells multiple times via email. The responses detailed specific medical scenarios that inspired certain paintings, experiences that would only be known to a practicing surgeon. Those were my experiences, I confirmed. My stories, my trauma, my healing through art. Another voice called out, "What about the paintings we've purchased? Are they fraudulent?" Sebastian stepped forward, ever the professional. The artwork itself is authentic, created by Madison Wells, the surgeon standing before you. The misattribution is being corrected through proper legal channels. All collectors will receive updated, accurate provenance documentation. I scanned the crowd, seeing a mixture of emotions: shock, confusion, fascination, anger. My gaze landed on Johnny and my college friends, who offered encouraging nods. Barbara stood nearby, her expression a mixture of pride and sadness. Proud of my work finally being properly attributed, sad about the circumstances surrounding the revelation. I'm happy to discuss my artistic process and inspiration with anyone interested, I offered. These works are deeply personal to me, each one connected to specific moments in my medical career, specific patients, specific challenges and triumphs. As the initial shock subsided, people began approaching me with questions. I found myself standing before my most personal painting, an abstract representation of my first successful emergency thoracotomy, explaining the emotional context behind the swirling reds and urgent brushstrokes to people who had previously attributed that power to Carol. Across the room, I caught glimpses of my sister as she faced her own interrogators, collectors demanding explanations, critics questioning everything she had ever told them, friends looking at her with newfound suspicion. Our parents stood nearby, clearly devastated by the public unraveling of our relationship and Carol's reputation. For the first time in years, I was being seen, truly seen, as both the surgeon and the artist I had always been. My voice was finally attached to my creations. The truth, however painfully revealed, was finally in the light. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of introductions, explanations, and emotional revelations. Art critics who had praised Madison Wells' work now spoke directly to me about my technique and inspiration. Collectors who had purchased my paintings approached with a mixture of concern about authenticity and curiosity about the actual artist. Friends expressed shock and support in equal measure. Throughout it all, I maintained a composed exterior while feeling increasingly drained. Explaining the same painful betrayal dozens of times, watching recognition dawn in each new face, became its own form of exhaustion. I always wondered why the artist never attended her own openings, one prominent collector commented. Carol explained it away so convincingly, the surgeon too busy saving lives, too private for public appearances. The irony, I replied, is that I would have loved to attend. I just never knew my work was being exhibited. Across the gallery, Carol sat alone in a corner, abandoned by the admirers who had once flocked around her. Our parents had moved to neutral territory, speaking quietly with Mickey Johnson, occasionally casting concerned glances toward both their daughters. The twin celebration they had anticipated had transformed into something unrecognizable. Sebastian approached, touching my elbow gently. "We should discuss next steps," he said quietly. "Several collectors are considering legal action, not against you, but against Carol and possibly the gallery. And there's the matter of financial restitution." I nodded tiredly. "Tomorrow. I can't process any more tonight." As the initial shock began to wear off, the gallery slowly emptied. Some guests departed awkwardly, unsure what social protocol covered, witnessing such a public unraveling. Others lingered, fascinated by the real-time drama. A few art world journalists remained, furiously taking notes for what would undoubtedly be headline news in tomorrow's culture sections. Finally, only the central players remained: Mickey, Sebastian, my parents, Carol, and me. The gallery felt cavernous now, my artwork surrounding us like silent witnesses to the night's revelations. My father approached first, his face lined with sorrow. "Madison," he said softly, "I don't know what to say. I'm so proud of your talent, but so heartbroken by how it's come to light." "I know, Dad," I replied, suddenly feeling the emotional weight crashing down. I never wanted it to happen this way. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked, her voice ragged. "When you discovered what Carol was doing, why keep it from us? Until this public confrontation?" I sighed, suddenly aware of how the evening must appear to them. Their daughters deliberately creating a public spectacle on what should have been a happy celebration. "I needed irrefutable proof," I explained. "Carol has always been persuasive. If I had made these accusations privately, it would have become my word against hers. This way, there could be no denial, no manipulation of the truth." My mother nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. 30 years, she whispered. 30 years we've celebrated your differences, your individual strengths. We never imagined this kind of deception between you." From her corner, Carol finally stood and approached our small family circle. Her makeup was smeared, her earlier poise completely evaporated. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely broken. "I didn't mean for it to become this," she said, her voice barely audible. "It started so small, just one painting, one opportunity. Then it snowballed until I couldn't find a way out." "There was always a way out," I countered. "Tell the truth. Give me credit. Stop selling my work without permission. And admit I was a fraud?" Carol's voice cracked. "Destroy everything I'd built? I kept telling myself I'd find a way to make it right eventually." "By continuing the lie indefinitely," my father said, more statement than question. Carol looked down. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly. "But I need you all to understand. I didn't do this to hurt Madison. I did it because I saw how talented she was, how her work deserved recognition, and I wanted to be part of something meaningful." "You could have been," I said, the words catching in my throat. "If you'd asked, if you'd been honest, we could have created something together as sisters instead of this." The simple truth of what might have been hung in the air between us. A parallel reality where Carol had championed my work openly, where we had built a creative partnership based on truth rather than deception. The path not taken that now could never be recovered. Mickey approached, keys in hand. "I need to close the gallery," he said apologetically. "Perhaps everyone should go home and continue this discussion tomorrow when emotions aren't so raw." As we stepped out of the Morrison Gallery into the cool night air, the physical distance between Carol and me seemed to mirror the emotional chasm that had opened between us. She stood apart, keys clutched tightly in her hand, while our parents hovered uncertainly in the middle ground. "Where will you go?" my mother asked Carol, her voice heavy with concern. Carol's laugh was hollow. Home, I suppose. Where else? Back to my apartment with its suspiciously bare walls. My father turned to me. Madison, would you like us to come with you? You shouldn't be alone tonight. I shook my head, suddenly craving solitude. I need space to process everything. I'll be fine. Sebastian approached with his briefcase. I'll call you tomorrow about next steps, he said quietly. Try to get some rest. As everyone prepared to depart, Carol suddenly moved toward me, stopping just beyond arm's reach. Maddie, she said, using my childhood nickname, we need to talk. Really talk. Not here, not with an audience. Just us. I think we've said everything that needs saying, I replied, my emotional reserves completely depleted. No, she insisted. There's more. Things you don't understand about why this happened. Something in her tone, a note of desperation beyond. The night's revelations made me pause. What things? Not here, she repeated, glancing toward our parents. Please, tomorrow, just give me 1 hour. I studied her face, identical to mine in features yet so different in expression. Despite everything, I couldn't completely sever the connection that had existed between us since before birth. 1 hour, I agreed reluctantly. My apartment, 10 o'clock. She nodded, something like relief flickering across her face. Then she turned and walked away without saying goodbye to our parents, her red dress vivid under the streetlights until she disappeared around a corner. My father placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You're sure you'll be okay tonight? I'm a surgeon, Dad, I reminded him with a tired smile. I've handled worse crises than this. Medical crises, my mother pointed out. This is different. This is family. The weight of that simple truth, this is family, settled heavily on all of us. What had happened tonight wasn't just a legal or professional matter. It was the fracturing of the most fundamental relationship in my life. After reassuring my parents once more, I hailed a taxi and gave the driver my address. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a final glimpse of my parents standing beneath the gallery's illuminated sign, looking suddenly older and smaller than I'd ever seen them. In the quiet of the taxi, I finally allowed myself to feel the full emotional impact of the evening. The public exposure, the professional implications, the family trauma, all of it crashed over me in waves. But beneath these immediate concerns lay a deeper question that I couldn't yet answer. What would happen tomorrow when Carol and I faced each other alone, without witnesses or mediators? What more could she possibly have to say that would explain or justify years of systematic deception? And was I prepared to hear it? Morning light filtered through my curtains, waking me from a fitful sleep. For a brief, peaceful moment, I existed in the liminal space between dreaming and waking, before the memories of the previous night came rushing back. The exhibition, the confrontation, the public unraveling of a deception years in the making. Reached for my phone, wincing at the flood of notifications, dozens of text messages from friends who had heard about the gallery incident, multiple voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, likely journalists seeking comments, several missed calls from my parents, and most concerning, an email from the hospital administration with the subject line, "Urgent meeting request." The art world scandal had apparently reached my professional domain. I sighed, wondering how many of my colleagues had already seen the story. How many patients might question having a surgeon whose personal life was suddenly tabloid material? I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water wash over me as I tried to prepare for Carol's impending visit. What could she possibly want to say? What explanation could justify 5 years of systematic theft and deception? At precisely 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Carol stood on the threshold looking nothing like the confident gallery representative from the night before. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her clothing casual, jeans and a simple blouse rather than her usual carefully curated ensembles. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly as I let her in. I gestured toward the kitchen table, already set with 2 mugs and a pot of coffee, a habit from countless twin conversations throughout our lives. We sat across from each other, the familiarity of the setup contrasting sharply with the estrangement between us. Carol wrapped her hands around her mug, but didn't drink. "I couldn't sleep last night," she began. "All I could think about was how completely I've destroyed everything between us." "That's an accurate assessment," I said, maintaining emotional distance despite the vulnerability she was displaying. She nodded, accepting my coldness as deserved. "I need to explain something, not to excuse what I did, but to help you understand how it happened." "I'm listening." Carol took a deep breath. "Do you remember my senior art exhibition in college, the installation piece about identity and perception?" I frowned slightly, the memory surfacing. "Vaguely. Something with mirrors and projections?" "It was a complete failure," she said flatly. "The professors tore it apart, called it derivative, technically flawed, conceptually weak. In front of everyone at the critique. I remembered now, Carol returning to our shared apartment in tears, refusing to discuss what had happened. "That same week," she continued, "you received that letter from Johns Hopkins accepting you to medical school. Mom and Dad were ecstatic. You had a clear path forward and I—" She trailed off, staring into her coffee. "You what?" "I had nothing. My work wasn't good enough. My technical skills weren't developing. Every creative idea I had felt hollow." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was the artistic twin. That was my identity since childhood. But I wasn't actually talented enough to succeed." I remained silent, letting her continue. "After graduation, while you thrived in medical school, I bounced between meaningless jobs in galleries and design firms. I was surrounded by actual artists, creating meaningful work while I produced nothing of value." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening. "Do you know what it's like to have a passion but not the talent to realize it?" "That doesn't justify stealing my work," I said quietly. "No, it doesn't," she agreed immediately. "Nothing justifies that. I'm just trying to explain the desperation I felt." She paused, gathering herself. "Remember when I visited you during your second year of residency? You showed me that painting, the one about losing your first patient." I nodded, remembering the piece clearly. Dark swirls of color surrounding a single point of light. My attempt to process the grief and responsibility I felt after losing a young car accident victim despite hours of surgery. It was so powerful, Maddie, so raw and honest. I took a photo because it moved me, not with any intention of using it. But a month later, when a small gallery was looking for new artists and I had nothing worthwhile to show, she shook her head. I told myself it was just temporary. One exhibition to get my foot in the door, then I'd create my own work. "But you didn't," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "The painting sold," she admitted, "for more than I'd ever made in a month at my job. The gallery owner wanted more work from the same artist. I panicked. I told myself I'd split the money with you someday, that I'd confess eventually." 5. Years is a long, eventually, Carol. She nodded miserably. Each lie required another lie to maintain it. Each success made confession more impossible. I created this elaborate fiction where you were the reclusive artist and I was your public representative. It solved everything, explained why the artist never appeared, why I had access to new work, why the paintings reflected medical experiences. "You stole my identity," I said. "Not just my artwork, but my experiences, my stories, my perspective as a surgeon." "I know," she whispered. "It became an addiction. The recognition, the respect, the sense of finally having value in the art world. People listened when I spoke about art. Critics analyzed your technique. Collectors paid thousands for pieces I claimed to represent. While I worked 80-hour weeks at the hospital, I added, completely unaware that my private creative outlet was building your career. Carol looked down at her untouched coffee. There's something else you should know, she said, her voice almost inaudible. The money, all of it, every dollar from every sale, I've kept it separate, in an account under both our names. This caught me off guard. What? She reached into her bag and removed a folder, sliding it across the table. Bank statements, account, information, the password to access everything online. Half of all proceeds from every sale, plus interest. It's all there, over $400,000. I stared at the folder without opening it. You think this makes it right? No, she said quickly. Nothing makes it right. But I need you to know I wasn't doing this just for the money. I never spent a cent of your share. I was going to tell you someday, give you everything you were owed. While continuing to take credit for my creativity? While building your reputation on my talent? Carol's face crumpled. I don't have an answer that will satisfy you. I became trapped in my own deception. Each success made it harder to imagine confessing, harder to face losing everything I thought I'd built. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine directly. Until last night, when I lost something far more valuable than any career or reputation. What's that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You, she said simply. My twin. My other half. The person who's known me since before we were born. A tear slipped down her cheek. I may never get your forgiveness, Maddie, and I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that this wasn't just cold, calculated theft. It was weakness, insecurity, and cowardice that spiraled out of control. I sat across from Carol, studying her face, identical to mine in features, yet now seeming like that of a stranger. Her confession hung in the air between us, raw and inadequate all at once. The folder containing proof of my share of the profits remained unopened on the table. You know what hurts the most? I finally said, breaking the heavy silence. It's not the theft of my artwork, or even the money. It's that you watched me struggle through medical school and residency, working 100-hour weeks, drowning in student debt, exhausting myself to the point of collapse, while you were selling my paintings for thousands of dollars. Carol flinched, as if I'd struck her. I know. Do you? Do you understand what those years were like for me? Do you know how many times I had to choose between buying groceries or paying my electric bill? How many nights I came home from 30-hour shifts too exhausted to eat, yet still found the energy to paint because it was the only thing keeping me sane? My voice had risen despite my attempts to maintain composure. The anger I'd been containing, since discovering her deception was finally breaking through. And all that time, you were building a career on my talent. You were being interviewed by art magazines. You were attending gallery openings in designer clothes, drinking champagne, with collectors who paid 5 figures for work you didn't create. I wanted to help you, Carol said weakly. I told myself that someday, when the time was right— Stop, I cut her off. Just stop with the someday excuse. You had thousands of opportunities to tell the truth. Every time you cashed a check, for my work. Every time you gave an interview about my creative process. Every time you visited me and saw new paintings on my walls that you knew you'd eventually take and sell. Carol's shoulders slumped. You're right. There's no justification. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, to put physical distance between us. And now that you've been caught, you want me to appreciate that you kept my share of the money, as if that somehow mitigates the betrayal? No, The money was never the point, Carol. It was my voice, my expression, my processing of trauma, and grief and the incredible weight of holding people's lives in my hands. Those paintings weren't commodities to be sold. They were pieces of my soul that you harvested and marketed like products. I paced the small kitchen, struggling to articulate the depth of my feelings. Do you know what I did after discovering your deception? I stopped painting, completely. The thought of picking up a brush made me physically ill, knowing that something so intimate and personal had been exploited without my knowledge. This admission seemed to hit Carol harder than anything else I'd said. You stopped? But Maddie, your talent was never meant for public consumption, I finished. Those paintings were for me, my therapy, my outlet. You took something healing and turned it into a commodity. Carol was crying openly now, making no attempt to wipe away her tears. I've destroyed everything, she whispered. Yes, I agreed, my anger giving way to exhaustion. You have. I returned to the table and finally opened the folder she'd brought. Bank statements showed regular deposits following gallery sales, exhibitions, and commissions, meticulous documentation of my share of the proceeds from my own work. The account balance matched what she'd claimed, just over $400,000. What happens now? Carol asked, her voice small. With the galleries, the collectors, the artwork still in circulation? Sebastian is handling the legal aspects, I replied. All sales will be halted pending proper attribution. Documentation will be updated to reflect me as the artist. The gallery has agreed to issue statements correcting the record. And us? She asked, the question barely audible. What happens to us, Maddie? I closed the folder and looked at my twin. The person who had once been my closest connection in the world, now revealed as my most profound betrayer. I don't know, I admitted. I don't think that's something I can answer today, or tomorrow, or maybe even this year. I understand, she nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I wouldn't expect anything else. We sat in silence for several long moments, the weight of 30 years of shared history and an uncertain future pressing down on us both. There's one more thing, Carol said eventually. Something you should know before you make any decisions about the artwork or the legal proceedings. I tensed, wondering what other revelation could possibly be coming. The Hoffman Foundation contacted Madison Wells last month, she continued. They want to commission a series for their new medical research center. 15 pieces exploring the intersection of medicine and art, with a focus on healing and hope. The commission is for $350,000. I stared at her, processing this information. And you're telling me this because it should be yours, she said simply. Not just the money, but the opportunity. It's exactly the kind of meaningful project your work deserves, displayed in a place where it could offer comfort to patients and families going through medical crises. I shook my head in disbelief. You're still making decisions about my art? Still trying to manage my career that I never asked for? No, Carol said quickly. I'm just passing along information that belongs to you. I haven't responded to them. I haven't accepted or negotiated anything. The contact information is in the folder. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. The revelation of Carol's deception had been painful, but straightforward. The aftermath, what to do with an artistic career I never sought, how to handle opportunities I never pursued, how to reclaim creative expression that had been tainted by betrayal, was infinitely more complicated. I need time, I said finally. Time to process everything. Time to decide what I want to do with my artwork going forward. Time to figure out if there's any path to repairing what's broken between us. Carol nodded, accepting this answer. She stood up tentatively, gathering her purse. For what it's worth, Maddie, and I know it's not worth much right now, I am genuinely sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for every moment of the last 5 years. For every lie, every theft, every betrayal of your trust. I didn't respond immediately, watching as she moved toward the door. Just before she reached it, I found my voice again. Carol, I called, causing her to turn back with a flicker of hope in her eyes. The money in that account. Use it to make Restitution to any collectors who feel defrauded by the misattribution. They bought artwork in good faith. They shouldn't suffer because of your deception. She nodded slowly. And the rest? Donate it, I said firmly. To arts programs in underserved schools, to medical art therapy programs, to something that might generate some actual good from this situation. I will, she promised, her hand on the doorknob. And Madison? Thank you for listening. I know I don't deserve even that much. As the door closed behind her, I sat alone, in my apartment, surrounded by the few paintings I had kept, works too personal or too painful to ever leave my private space. For the first time in weeks, I felt an urge to pick up a brush, to process this new trauma the only way I truly knew how. Whether that creative impulse would remain private or ever find a public expression again was a question I wasn't ready to answer. But acknowledging its return felt like the first small step toward reclaiming my artistic voice from the shadow of betrayal. The weeks following my confrontation with Carol passed in a blur of legal meetings, press inquiries, and difficult conversations. Sebastian had been right about the complexity of unwinding years of artistic misattribution. Each painting required documentation, each collector needed reassurance, each gallery demanded explanations. Through it all, I continued my work at the Key Hospital, finding strange comfort in the structured chaos of the surgical ward. There, I was still just Dr. Wells, reliable, focused, and untouched by the art world scandal that had begun to fade from public interest. My colleagues had been surprisingly supportive after the initial shock wore off. Dr. Nick Rivera, the chief of surgery, had called me into his office the day after the gallery confrontation. "I've seen the news," he said, without preamble as I sat across from his desk. "I can explain," I began, but he waved me off. "No need. I just wanted to say that your artwork is extraordinary, Madison. The fact that you've been creating at that level while maintaining your surgical excellence is remarkable." I hadn't known how to respond, unprepared for admiration rather than concern about negative publicity. "The hospital supports you completely," he continued. "And if you need time off to deal with the legal aspects of this situation, just let me know." That unexpected support had been a lifeline during the tumultuous aftermath. While the art world buzzed with the scandal of the surgeon whose twin stole her identity, my medical colleagues formed a protective barrier around me, screening calls from journalists and deflecting curious questions from patients. 4 weeks after our birthday exhibition, I received a large envelope from Sebastian's office. Inside was a comprehensive report detailing the resolution of most legal matters surrounding my artwork. Carol had cooperated fully, signing affidavits, confirming my authorship of all pieces, transferring the separate account containing my share of sales into my sole control, and providing complete records of all transactions involving my work. The Morrison Gallery had issued formal statements, correcting the attribution of all Madison Wells artwork, and most collectors had accepted the authentication certificates confirming they owned genuine works by the actual Madison Wells, now properly identified as the surgeon artist rather than her twin. Mickey Johnson had even reached out personally, offering to host an exhibition of my work, under my true identity, whenever I felt ready to share my art again. I set the paperwork aside, reflecting on how thoroughly my private creative outlet had been transformed into a public identity I never sought. The question that remained unanswered was whether I wanted to embrace that identity or retreat from it entirely. That evening, I found myself standing before a blank canvas for the first time in weeks. The untouched white surface seemed to hold infinite possibilities and infinite questions. Could I reclaim this form of expression after it had been so thoroughly corrupted by betrayal? Could I separate my creative voice from the commercial enterprise Carol had built around it? My phone rang, interrupting my contemplation. It was Barbara, my former art professor. "Madison," she greeted warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I assured her. "I was just staring at a blank canvas and questioning everything. She laughed softly. The eternal artistic dilemma. How are you holding up through all this? Better than expected, I admitted. The legal issues are mostly resolved. My job is secure. The only thing I haven't figured out is what to do about my art. That's actually why I'm calling, Barbara said. I'm curating a special exhibition at the University Gallery focusing on art as healing, works created by medical professionals, patients, and art therapists. I'd be honored if you'd consider participating. I hesitated, the invitation both appealing and terrifying. I don't know, Barbara. I haven't painted anything new since discovering Carol's deception. I'm not sure I can separate my art from that betrayal yet. Which is precisely why you should consider it, she countered gently. This exhibition isn't about commercial value or critical acclaim. It's about the therapeutic power of creative expression, something you understood intuitively long before your work was commodified without your consent. Her words resonated, reminding me why I had begun painting in the first place, not for recognition or validation, but as a necessary processing of experiences too complex for words alone. The exhibition is 3 months away, Barbara continued. No pressure to commit immediately. Just consider it. After we hung up, I turned back to the blank canvas with renewed perspective. Perhaps the path forward wasn't abandoning my art or embracing the unwanted career Carol had created, but reclaiming my creative voice on my own terms, sharing it intentionally rather than having it stolen. I picked up a brush for the first time in weeks, mixed a deep blue that matched the surgical scrubs I wore daily, and made the first decisive stroke across the canvas. The following morning, I received an unexpected text from my mother. Your father and I are having dinner with Carol tonight. She mentioned wanting to speak with you when you're ready. No pressure, just letting you know. I stared at the message, a complex tangle of emotions rising within me. In the chaos following the exhibition, I had maintained complete distance from Carol. Our parents had carefully navigated this separation, seeing us individually, but never mentioning one to the other. This indirect communication, Carol expressing willingness to talk through our parents rather than reaching out directly, felt like the first acknowledgement of new boundaries between us. She was no longer assuming the intimate access we'd always shared as twins. She was requesting permission to re-enter my life. I didn't respond immediately, unsure what answer to give. The wound was still raw, the betrayal too fundamental to simply move past with a conversation. And yet, the complete severing of a lifelong connection left its own distinctive pain. Later that day, Sebastian called with news about the Hoffman Foundation commission Carol had mentioned. They've reached out directly, he explained. They're still interested in commissioning the series for their medical center, but they want to work directly with you, now that they understand the actual situation. I don't know if I'm ready for a project that size, I admitted. They're willing to be flexible on timeline, Sebastian assured me. And Madison, they're particularly interested in work exploring the healing process. Not just physical healing, but emotional recovery from trauma. Given what you've experienced, it could be powerfully authentic. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Creating art about healing while working through my own recovery from betrayal, displaying it in a medical center where I might have practiced under different circumstances. I'll think about it, I promised. That evening, I found myself in my small home studio again, the painting from the previous night now developing into something recognizable, an abstract representation of surgical hands, rendered in blues and whites against a shadowed background. It felt different from my previous work, more intentional, less raw, infused with the awareness that it might someday be seen by others of my choosing. As I worked, I thought about Carol's request to speak, about the Hoffman Foundation's commission, about Barbara's exhibition invitation. Each represented a different possible path forward: reconciliation, professional opportunity, artistic community. None offered a perfect resolution to the complex aftermath of betrayal, but each contained the possibility of transformation, of converting pain into something meaningful. I set down my brush and picked up my phone, typing a response to my mother's text from that morning. Tell Carol I'm not ready yet, but someday, maybe. In the meantime, I hope she's finding her own path forward. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement that healing might eventually be possible for both of us. And for now, that small opening toward a different future felt like enough. 3 months passed quickly, each day bringing small steps toward rebuilding my life and reclaiming my artistic voice. The blue painting of surgical hands had led to another, then another, a new series emerging that felt distinctly different from my previous work. Less reactive to trauma, more reflective on healing, less private catharsis, more intentional communication. Barbara's exhibition at the University Gallery was approaching, and I had finally agreed to include 3 pieces, one from my early work that Carol had never seen or sold, and 2 new paintings created since our confrontation. The decision hadn't come easily, but with each brushstroke, I found myself reclaiming something that had been taken from me, not just ownership of my art, but the joy of creation itself. I had also tentatively accepted the Hoffman Foundation commission, negotiating a timeline that allowed me to work at my own pace while maintaining my surgical career. Their vision for art that could comfort patients and families in crisis resonated deeply with my own evolving purpose. Sebastian had helped me establish a proper legal framework for my artwork: copyright protection, clear documentation of creation, dates, and a transparent system for any future sales or exhibitions. Never again would someone be able to claim my creative expression as their own. Through it all, Carol remained at a distance. Our parents continued their careful navigation between us never pushing for reconciliation, but gently keeping channels of communication open. I knew from brief updates that she had left the art world entirely, enrolled in a graphic design program, and was attempting to build a legitimate career using her own talents. The morning of Barbara's exhibition opening dawned crisp and clear. I stood in my apartment carefully wrapping the 3 paintings for transport when my phone rang. The screen displayed, "Dad." "Morning, sweetheart," he greeted when I answered. "Just calling to wish you good luck tonight. Mom and I are so proud of you." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, securing bubble wrap around the frame of my newest piece. "Are you and Mom coming?" There was a slight hesitation before he answered. "We'd love to, but we wanted to check with you first. Carol mentioned the exhibition to us yesterday." My hands stilled. "Oh?" "She didn't ask to attend," he clarified quickly. "She just said she was happy you were showing your work again. But your mother and I realized that if we attend, it might put you in an awkward position if people ask about her." The consideration touched me, my parents continuing to navigate the broken relationship between their daughters with such care. "I want you both there," I said firmly. "This is important to me, and your support means everything. People can think what they want about Carol's absence." After hanging up, I found myself staring at the wrapped paintings, thinking about how strange it would feel to publicly display my work intentionally for the first time. For years, my art had been exhibited without my knowledge or consent. Tonight would be different, a conscious choice to share something deeply personal. As I loaded the paintings into my car, I thought about Carol knowing about the exhibition but not asking to attend. There was respect in that distance, an acknowledgement of boundaries that would have been unimaginable before our confrontation. The why? University Gallery was already busy when I arrived that evening. Barbara greeted me warmly, helping me carry my wrapped paintings to the installation area. "We've given you the east wall," she explained, gesturing to a well-lit space. "Perfect. Lighting. Good flow of visitor traffic." As we unwrapped and hung my pieces, I felt a curious mixture of vulnerability and pride. These paintings, especially the new ones, represented not just my processing of medical experiences, but my journey through betrayal and toward recovery. The exhibition's theme, Healing Through Art, encompassed works from various sources, doctors, like myself who used art to process their experiences, patients who created during their recovery, art therapists who facilitated healing for others. Each piece told a story of transformation, of pain channeled into creation. By the time the doors opened to the public, my parents had arrived, both embracing me with fierce pride. I guided them through the exhibition, introducing them to other artists, watching their faces as they truly saw my work displayed professionally for the first time. "It's different seeing it like this," my mother observed, standing before my newest painting, an abstract rendering of fragmented mirrors slowly being reassembled. "In your apartment, they're just Madison's paintings. Here, they're part of something larger." Her insight struck me powerfully. My art had never been meant for isolation. Neither the private creation Carol had exploited, nor the public commodity she had manufactured. Its true purpose lay somewhere in between, personal expression shared intentionally to connect with others experiencing similar journeys. As the evening progressed, I found myself engaged in meaningful conversations with visitors, medical professionals, who recognized the experiences embedded in my brushstrokes, patients who found comfort in the visual language of healing, art students curious about my unusual dual career. During a quiet moment, Barbara approached with a glass of water. "Someone asked about your artistic background," she mentioned casually. "I wasn't sure how much you wanted me to share about recent events." I considered this carefully. The truth is fine, I decided, not as scandal, but as context. My work was exhibited without my knowledge for years while I focused on my medical career. I've only recently begun claiming my artistic voice publicly. Barbara nodded approvingly. "Ownership of your narrative is part of the healing process too." As she walked away, I felt my phone vibrate with a text message. Expecting a well-wish from a colleague, I was startled to see Carol's name on the screen for the first time in months. "I hear your exhibition opening is tonight. I hope it's everything you deserve. Recognition on your own terms. Appreciation for your genuine talent. Your voice matters, Maddie. It always did." I stared at Carol's text for a long moment, conflicting, emotions washing over me. Her message held no excuses, no pleas for forgiveness, no requests to meet, just simple acknowledgement of this milestone and its importance. It was the first direct communication between us since our confrontation in my apartment 3 months earlier. After hesitating, I typed a brief response. "Thank you." Not warm, not inviting further conversation, but not hostile either. A small recognition of her gesture. The remainder of the exhibition opening passed in a blur of conversations and congratulations. Several visitors expressed interest in my work, including a neurologist who connected deeply with my painting of surgical hands. "You've captured something essential about the responsibility we carry," she told me. "The tension between technical precision and human compassion." By the time the event concluded, I felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. My parents hugged me goodbye, both lingering a moment longer than usual. "We're so proud of you," my father said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just for your talent, but for your resilience." As I drove home that night, Carol's text still lingered in my thoughts. There had been something different in her words, an absence of the desperate justification that had characterized our last conversation. She had reached out not to explain herself or seek absolution, but simply to acknowledge my achievement. The following week brought unexpected news. Debbie Williams, the art journalist who had interviewed Madison Wells multiple times via email, wanted to speak with me about a feature article. "Not about the scandal," she clarified during our phone call. "About your work itself, the genuine intersection of your medical career and artistic expression, how your surgical expertise influences your creative process, and vice versa." I hesitated, wary of publicity after everything that had happened. "Why now?" "Because your work deserves to be understood on its own merits," she replied simply. The circumstances of its previous exposure were unfortunate, but the art itself remains powerful. This would be an opportunity to reclaim your artistic narrative. After careful consideration, I agreed to the interview, with Sebastian present, to ensure proper boundaries. We met at a quiet cafe near the hospital, where I could speak openly about my creative process for the first time. These paintings were never intended as commercial products, I explained as Debbie recorded our conversation. They began as necessary processing of the emotional weight of medical practice. When you hold someone's life in your hands daily, you carry that responsibility home with you. And now? She asked. Now that your work has found an audience, by choice this time, has your relationship with painting changed? The question struck deeper than she likely intended. Yes, I admitted after a thoughtful pause. Before, my art was purely personal, a private dialogue between myself and my experiences. Now there's an awareness of potential viewers, a consciousness that these images might resonate with others facing similar struggles. Do you find that constraining or liberating? Both, I answered honestly. There's a different kind of vulnerability in intentional sharing, but there's also unexpected power in realizing your personal expression might help someone else process their own experiences. The article appeared 2 weeks later, thoughtful, respectful, and focused entirely on my art, rather than the scandal surrounding its earlier misattribution. Debbie had captured something essential about my dual identities as surgeon and artist, presenting them not as competing careers but as complementary approaches to human healing. The piece generated interest from unexpected quarters. A medical school reached out about having me speak to students about maintaining creative outlets during demanding training. A patient advocacy group inquired about using images of my work in their materials about healthcare experiences. And most significantly, the director of the hospital where I worked suggested creating a small, rotating exhibition of art by medical staff in the main atrium, a project I found myself unexpectedly enthusiastic about organizing. 6 months after our birthday confrontation, I received an official invitation to a charity gala benefiting arts programs in public schools. The organization listed among its recent donors was Carol Wells Design, the new graphic design business my sister had established. I recognized the implied message. Carol was rebuilding her life legitimately, using her actual talents rather than appropriating mine. She was finding ways to support arts education without directly contacting me or seeking credit for her contributions. The night of the gala, I stood in my apartment, invitation in hand, considering whether to attend. It wasn't clear if Carol would be present, but the possibility of an unplanned encounter felt significant. Were we ready for that? Was I? After careful consideration, I decided to go. Not to seek reconciliation or confrontation, but to support a cause I believed in, regardless of Carol's potential presence. The elegant hotel ballroom was crowded when I arrived, filled with supporters of arts education mingling over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I scanned the room instinctively, searching for my mirror image among the guests. I didn't see Carol immediately, allowing me to relax slightly as I accepted a glass of sparkling water and began circulating. Several people recognized me, some from the art world, others from medical circles, and conversations flowed easily about the importance of creative expression in education. It was during one such conversation that I felt a distinct shift in the room's energy. Without turning, I knew Carol had arrived. The twin connection that had existed since before birth, damaged but not entirely destroyed, alerted me to her presence before I actually saw her. When I finally turned, she was across the room, engaged in conversation with the event organizer. She wore a simple black dress, her hair styled differently than I'd ever seen it, shorter, less dramatic than her former gallery persona. Even from a distance, I could see that her gestures were more subdued, her manner less commanding of attention. She hadn't noticed me yet, giving me a moment to observe this new version of my twin, A Carol attempting to rebuild herself without the foundation of my stolen work, without the false identity she had constructed over years. Then she looked up, her eyes meeting mine across the crowded room. For a breathless moment, neither of us moved or reacted. Then Carol offered a small, hesitant nod, acknowledgement without presumption, recognition without demand. I returned the nod, equally measured. Not forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps the first tentative step toward whatever our relationship might eventually become. A year passed, a full cycle of seasons, holidays, and professional milestones navigated in the strange, new reality where my twin and I existed in parallel but separate orbits. I continued my surgical practice while developing my artistic voice, finding a meaningful balance between the two aspects of my identity. The Hoffman Foundation Commission was completed and installed in the Medical Research Center. 15 paintings, exploring healing and hope now hanging in spaces where patients and families navigated difficult medical journeys. The feedback had been profoundly rewarding, with visitors often leaving notes about how specific pieces had offered comfort during challenging times. I had developed a routine of painting twice weekly, usually after hospital shifts when the emotional residue of medical work needed processing. But increasingly, I found myself creating pieces that looked forward rather than backward, exploring possibility rather than processing trauma. My parents had gradually stopped their careful tiptoeing around mentioning Carol in my presence. They shared small updates about her new graphic design business, her volunteer work with youth arts programs, her apparent efforts to build an authentic life. I received these mentions with quiet neutrality, neither encouraging deeper discussion nor shutting it down. We had encountered each other occasionally at professional events and charity functions, exchanging those same measured nods of acknowledgement without attempting conversation. These brief moments carried less tension with each occurrence, the raw wound of betrayal slowly scarring over, not forgotten, but no longer actively bleeding. As our 31st birthday approached, I found myself thinking more frequently about Carol and the dramatic confrontation that had marked our 30th. The day that should have been a celebration had instead become a public unraveling of deception and identity. This year would be different, quiet, separate, unremarkable. A week before our birthday, I received a small package delivered to my apartment. The return address showed Carol's design studio. Inside was a sleek portfolio case containing a single document, a certificate of ownership for a web domain, MadisonWellsArt.com. A brief note was attached. This belongs to you. I secured it years ago but never used it. The hosting is paid for 5 years, no strings attached. Do with it what you will, or nothing at all. See, I sat with the certificate for a long time, understanding its significance. Carol was relinquishing. The last remnant of control over my artistic identity, the digital presence she might have created to further her fraudulent career, was instead being handed to me untouched, for my exclusive use if I chose. The gesture was meaningful precisely because it asked nothing in return, no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no acknowledgement. Just a quiet restoration of something that should have been mine from the beginning. On the morning of our birthday, I woke to the usual messages from friends and colleagues. My parents called early, wishing me well and mentioning they would see Carol for dinner that evening. There was no suggestion that I should join them, no pressure to reunite on this milestone day. I spent the morning at the hospital, performing a scheduled surgery and making rounds. Several colleagues remembered my birthday, offering good wishes and small gifts. In the afternoon, I returned home, planning a quiet evening of painting, a personal celebration of how far I'd come in reclaiming my creative voice. As I set up my easel, my phone buzzed with a text notification from a number I didn't immediately recognize. Opening it, I found a photograph of a small cafe table with 2 coffee cups, accompanied by a message. I'm at Frida's Cafe for the next hour. No expectations, no agenda. Just if you want to mark the day with 5 minutes of civility between twins who've shared 31 birthdays. If not, I understand completely. Carol. Frida's was where we'd met the day after I discovered her deception, where she had first tried to dissuade me from attending the gallery exhibition that would expose her fraud. The location choice seemed deliberately significant. Returning. To the beginning of the unraveling, but under very different circumstances. I stood in my studio, brush in hand, considering the invitation. There was no manipulation in her message, no emotional leverage, just a simple opening if I chose to accept it. After a year of measured distance, was I ready for direct conversation? Not reconciliation, perhaps, but acknowledgement of our shared birthday? Setting down my brush, I changed into fresh clothes and called a taxi. 20 minutes later, I stood outside Frida's, looking through the window at my twin sitting alone at a corner table. She wasn't checking her phone or fidgeting nervously, just waiting calmly, prepared for either my arrival or absence. As I pushed open the door, the familiar cafe sounds washed over me. Quiet conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, soft background music. Carol looked up, a fleeting expression of surprise crossing her face before she carefully schooled her features into neutral acknowledgement. I approached her table, not yet sitting. "Hello, Carol." "Madison," she replied simply. "Thank you for coming." I gestured to the second coffee cup. "For me?" She nodded. "Oat milk latte, still your preference?" The fact that she remembered such a small detail after a year of separation wasn't lost on me. I sat down across from her, the closest we'd been since that confrontation in my apartment. "Happy birthday," I said quietly. "Happy birthday," she echoed, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. 31 years. We had come full circle in a way, born together, driven apart by betrayal, now sitting across from each other on our shared birthday, not as the inseparable twins we once were, but as two individuals navigating the possibility of a different kind of relationship. Neither forgiveness nor forgetting, but perhaps the first tentative step toward something new. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.